milk production hormone. We have prolactin stimulating and prolactin inhibiting factors, but don't worry about that. Just remember prolactin. You have many hormones that affect the production of milk, or prolactin is the main one. Now, interestingly, I don't know how many of you have ever breastfed, but you can have all the milk you want, but you have to have let down, and that response is from the baby trying to nurse. Then you will feel a tingling sensation. That's the oxytocin being stimulated from the hypothalamus neurologically, a neural connection to the posterior pituitary. When the baby starts to suck, you have what we call milk letdown. That is the ability of those ducts to squeeze the milk out so the baby can actually get the milk. So you can have all the milk you want from the prolactin, but you have to have the oxytocin from the posterior pituitary for it to actually be let down and out into the, squeezed out of the ducts and through the nipple. Growth hormone we mentioned, and that I already went over that. Thyroid stimulating hormone, we'll talk more in detail about that. That stimulates, again, from the anterior pituitary. This thyroid stimulating hormone causes the thyroid to produce thyroid hormones. Posterior pituitary, I mentioned oxytocin. The other one is anti-diuretic hormone. You know that already. We talked about that the second week of school. And that is, it increases water reabsorption in the kidney. And that's the one that we'll focus again on next week when we talk about the kidney function. Another little thing I wanted to mention, oxytocin isn't just milk let down. It also has to do with the birthing of the child with the uterine contractions. So oxytocin will stimulates those contractions during childbirth. Again, posterior pituitary, if we have too much of anti-diuretic hormone now, that we say syndrome of inappropriate ADH, do you remember that we'll end up with a fluid volume excess. You'll see high blood pressure in these patients because they've got more intravascular volume. They have hyponatremia, low sodium, because what sodium is there gets diluted. You'll see concentrated dark-colored urine. The renin-angiotensin aldosterone system senses that there's too much volume, doesn't it? And it signals the kidney to decrease aldosterone production. Signals the adrenal to decrease the production of aldosterone. So the kidneys spill sodium into the urine, and it makes that sodium deficit even worse, doesn't it? The compensation for syndrome of inappropriate ADH doesn't help the situation. Body tries to compensate. It's sensing too much volume, not enough. And so the signal goes to the adrenal, lowers, aldosterone is produced, and with that, sodium is lost. That makes it worse. So you have to just restrict fluids in these patients. Too little hormone, remember, was diabetes insipidus. That person is just voiding all the time. Excessive water is lost. The nephrons in the kidney don't reabsorb it. The urine becomes very diluted. Anisha gets very thirsty because you're getting dehydrated. You would expect perhaps the blood pressure is going to drop from not enough volume. And you can treat this with synthetic antidiuretic hormone, also known as vasopressin. Now, later today we're going to be talking about diabetes mellitus. A reminder not to confuse the two. Diabetes, the word itself means excessive urine, but there's two different reasons. One is due to high glucose levels and osmotic diuresis. This is because of antidiuretic hormone deficiency. Other problems you can get with the anterior pituitary. Now we're at that higher level. You can have, remember I said, with problems with the anterior pituitary, you have multiple problems across all systems. Another one that you will see is hypopituitarianism, is a decrease in all of those hormones. So this could be congenital. It could be due to head trauma. There could be a tumor within the pituitary, benign or cancerous, that is compressing and suppressing the function of the anterior pituitary. You can get an infection. You can get vascular malformations. You could even have surgical removal because oftentimes when there's a pituitary tumor, they have to go intranasally and remove the tumor. It's right in the middle of the brain, if you will, right behind the nasal passages and in the center there. So they access it surgically through the nose, and they can remove the tumor, but oftentimes that would end up with the patient having to get hormone replacement for all the hormones that are normally produced by those stimulating hormones that are produced by the anterior pituitary. Meaning, we don't have synthetic stimulating hormones. We don't have synthetic releasing hormones from the hypothalamus, but we do have synthetic end organ hormones. Does that make sense? Okay. Hyperpituitarianism, you're going to see an increase in all of the anterior pituitary hormones. If you have, depending on the type of growth, you can see excess production of some of the pituitary hormones. So that would be classified as hyperpituitarianism. Some of the conditions we'll be talking about are acromegaly, where you have increase in growth hormone, prolactinoma, which will produce increased prolactin. So, for example, if you had a male presenting with milk production, you say, wow, what's going on here? There's something the matter with his hormones. We could link it back to all the way to his anterior pituitary. Cushing syndrome, which we're going to be talking about in just a second. So all of these conditions. So let's look at all the hormones. When we say hypopituitarianism for the anterior pituitary, we could have decrease in growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating, and luteinizing. All of them could be lower. So then you think, well, then we're going to have problems with the thyroid gland. We're going to have problems with growth. We're going to have problems with the adrenal cortex, the adrenal, especially the cortisol hormone, FSH and LH. We're going to have problems with female and male reproductive functions. So, what you're going to see depends entirely on what the deficiency is the malformation or surgical removal. When we say vascular AV malformations, what we mean is the blood supply could be interrupted to one of these areas and cause problems. So we'll zero in now on growth hormone for a minute. Again, it's the releasing hormone is from the anterior pituitary. We have growth hormone. For years, we only thought it was important during periods of rapid growth. And you think of dwarfism versus acromegaly. They were the two classic things that we talked about. But we're more and more recognizing the production of these insulin-like growth factors, which increase protein synthesis. So in addition to bone and cartilage growth, there's increased muscle body organ growth, muscular growth. And this is before the growth plates close in those rapid periods of growth. But we've also seen these anti-insulin effects. So what happens is the growth hormone, we're finding, lessens the use of glucose for fuel. So we'll see increased use of fats, breakdown fats. Increased use of the free fatty acids. So we see a decrease in fat. Adiposity is fat. We also see increased blood glucose. It's an anti-insulin effect. So then you start thinking, well, could this be used for, and is it being used for weight control? Yeah, there's a lot of research in this area, in addition to some of the GI hormones to investigate products that would help with fat distribution and accumulation of fat. But for now, you think of it, the traditional is too much growth hormone before the end plates close, the growth plates close. You're going to get increased stature, a tall person, abnormally tall, versus a very a deficiency of growth hormone at that critical period of growth in children. You'll get dwarfism, where they never grow, the long bones don't grow as well. You may get normal size head, but your arms and legs and your trunk could be normal size, but it's the linear growth of those long bones that we mostly see. If you've ever seen a dwarf, you've seen that the head and the trunk are usually of normal size, and it's the extremities that are short. It doesn't affect any other functions normally, though, unless there's other problems, and it could be simply a deficiency of growth hormone. Now, growth hormone is stimulated by fasting, by stress, and it's inhibited by cortisol and increased glucose levels. The hypothalamus produces growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, which travels to the anterior pituitary, which produces growth hormone. Now, this is different than the other tracks we're going to look at, because this hormone is actually produced by the anterior pituitary. In other hormones, you're going to see